Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley here for EllenHudson.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing 4 ways to use the brand new Abstract Mountain and Abstract Sunset dies from the Essentials by Ellen June 2021 release. I think you're going to love these dies. And I have a beautiful color palette that I picked out around some ink colors. And what I've done is I've taken the ink colors and I've matched them to some colored cardstock in my stash. And I'll be using these cardstocks today to build my Abstract Mountain and Abstract Sunset backgrounds. Now here's a look at the dies. You can see that they cut all of the pieces that you need to kind of piece together these backgrounds, and I will be combining it with the brand new All About You stamp set and coordinating die. Now this stamp set was designed to coordinate with the Nice of You die set. So it is a one-piece stamp, and you will cut out all of these sentiments at once, and I'll show you that in action here in just a bit. So I'm going to start out my projects by die cutting both the Abstract Mountain and the Abstract Sunset dies from each of these colors of cardstock. I have some ivory, some navy, some greens, and some pinks here to create a really beautiful color combination. Now each of these dies is going to cut several pieces that all kind of build together to create a background. Now I didn't want to go through each of these colors and try to sort them all out in the end. So as I die cut each color of cardstock, I'm going to keep all of the pieces from the die together and kind of hold them together with a piece of Post-it tape. And then I'm just going to kind of stack them off to the side. So if I need the top piece from the cream cardstock, I can just reach over and grab it, and kind of so on and so forth. Now I can die cut both of these at once. They do fit on a half sheet of 8.5 by 11 cardstock, and the finished size of these backgrounds is about 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. So I'm just going to work my way through the various colors of cardstock, and then I can start building up my backgrounds. And you can see that it is easy to tell the pieces from each kind of background die apart as you get more accustomed to working with them. I definitely, as I was done with these projects, could tell if it was a piece that was from the Abstract Mountain die set or a piece from the Abstract Sunset die. Now, once I had all of the pieces die cut from all of the cardstocks, I'm going to start building up my first piece here. And you're going to notice that I've just pushed the corner of this horizon piece up into the upper left-hand corner of my MISTI, and I'm just kind of using the edge of the MISTI to line all of these up together. Now, in the end, I wasn't adhering these down at this point, so I didn't really need to use my MISTI. But when I go to assemble these and kind of put them down permanently, I did find this to be very helpful. So I started out with kind of this creamy white sky, a darker orange first layer, a kind of lighter corally orange second layer, and then I'm moving down into the pink and the stardust color, and then some greens, and then finally a blue. And I did change my mind a little bit here and there, but you can see I just grabbed the pieces that I need from each set of colored cardstock die cut pieces, and I just placed them into my MISTI to make sure that I liked the overall grouping. Now, in order to kind of keep all of these pieces together as one big grouping, I'm going to slide a piece of scrap paper underneath all of these layers so I can pick them up all at once and just put a piece of delicate surface painter's tape across them to kind of hold them in place, because I am going to kind of dress up a few of these layers to make my background a little more interesting. But you can see on its own, this is absolutely beautiful. So I'm starting out with that off-white or creamy horizon piece, and I thought it would be really beautiful to add a little bit of the Concord & Ninth Ballet Slipper ink. So I'm just taking a blending brush and kind of blending on a little bit of this pink ink. It's going to add a little bit of glow to the skyline here and just a little more color and help it not to be so stark. But I found that this creamy color with these other colors that I'm using really worked well. Now, once I had that kind of ink blended, you can see it added a little glow, a little pinky glow to my sunset sky here. I'm going to actually start taking some of these pieces out and adding a little bit of gold embossing to the edge. So I'm just picking up this first layer here. This, by the way, is the Abstract Sunset background that I'm working on first. And I am going to just take the edge of my Versamark ink pad and add a little bit of ink to the edge of this upper layer here. I don't know, it really isn't a mountain, I guess. But it is a part of the landscape layer here. And I'm adding a little bit of Brutus Monroe Gilded Embossing Powder. Now, in some areas, the embossing powder got a little low, so I'm just taking a clean, dry paintbrush and brushing away a little bit of the excess embossing powder, and then I'm going to heat set that. Now, I did this on the first couple layers of this sunset background just to add a little bit of gold detail, and I think this really turned out beautifully. I'm going to show you how you can also add a little dimension to your background as you build it up here in just a bit. But first of all, I want to show you how I adhered this together permanently. I'm taking some sheet adhesive from Altenew here and a scrap piece of copy or computer paper, and I am adhering them together by pushing the corners up into the upper left-hand corner of my MISTI so that I can press these down together. So this leaves me with a lightweight piece of paper that's completely covered in adhesive. Now I'm going to take the backer and I'm going to remove it kind of halfway down and hold it in place with my magnet. And then I'm going to start building my scene again. So I'm starting with the uppermost piece, making sure I have it pressed against the edge of my MISTI along the top and that left edge. And then I'm just pressing that into place on the adhesive that's on this piece of paper. And I'm just going to work my way down, fitting these together like a puzzle. And this is really fun. This is a lot like paper piecing with a die cut. For this second kind of orangey pink layer, I am adding a piece of white cardstock. It's just plain white cardstock because I'm going to add some dimension to that second layer. And then I'm working my way down. Now this was really fun, and I love the way that these landscapes really come together. They create some really beautiful scenes, and once you have all of your die cutting done, it's really effortless. So as I add each layer, I'm just making sure that they are butted up against the previous layer so that you don't see any of the white paper from behind peeking through. And then I'm going to take this over to my trimmer and trim off any excess paper that's left over. Now, my first idea for using these Abstract Mountain and Abstract Sunset dies is to die cut them into various shapes. So I'm using the brand new Essentials by Ellen Essential Arches die to die cut this background. Now, it is beautiful as it is, but when you add a little bit of interest to it by changing the shape, I think it is really beautiful. And as with all of the essential shape dies from the Essentials by Ellen line, these arches create not only the solid shape, but also a really delicate frame as well. Now I've used the Abstract Sunset die here to die cut from white cardstock about 3 or 4 times. And I'm going to use those plain white cardstock layers to build up this second layer in my landscape there. And I'm just using a little liquid adhesive to adhere the layers on top of each other. Now, I didn't build up the dimension before I die cut it because this cardstock is rather thick and I wouldn't have been able to die cut through all of these white cardstock layers. So I'm just adding a couple layers of white cardstock on top of the piece that I already kind of nestled in there and adhered to the copy paper. And then I'm going to trim off the excess, and then I can add some more liquid adhesive and add another layer. So I think in total, I have about 4 layers of the white cardstock, and I'm going to finish this off by topping this bit of dimension with that kind of corally orange die cut there that I have that has the little bit of gold embossing along the top. Now, because I wanted to use the frame as well, when I trim off this kind of corally orange layer, I'm going to save those little scraps, and I'm going to adhere them by nestling them onto the frame as well so that the frame will match this arched die cut that I have. So you'll see me take this little piece here from the edge, and I'm going to adhere it onto the frame. Now, I did not add all of the dimension onto the frame that I did onto that main center arch there, but I did want the orange to carry over from the main piece onto the frame as well. So I just topped it off with that little bit of scrap there, and I'm going to trim that down. Now, when I die cut this background using that arch die, I lost a lot of my ink blending. So I just added a little bit more of that Ballet Slipper ink to my arch there. And then I am going to start adhering this onto a top folding A2 size card front. Now, I added my arch into the center of my card. I did not adhere it down at this point. And I added some liquid glue to the back side of my frame so that I could kind of nestle this around that main arch piece. Then I used a T-square ruler to make sure that that was straight along the front of my card. And then I added some foam adhesive to the back of this arch piece and adhered that in the middle so that it would have even more dimension. Now for all of the sentiments today, I am using this All About You stamp set and the coordinating U die that is a part of the brand new Essentials by Ellen June 2021 release. And this All About You stamp is really cool because it is a one-piece stamp. You can mount the entire thing to your MISTI. I'm going to prep the surface of this antique ivory cardstock with my powder tool because I am going to gold heat emboss all of these sentiments. Now you're going to get several sentiments that are going to stamp and die cut all at once. This was designed as a one-piece stamp with a coordinating one-piece die, and this is really cool. If you haven't seen the Nice of You stamp set from the Essentials by Ellen line, this works in the same way. In fact, this stamp coordinates with the Nice of You die set. So I've gone ahead and inked that up using some Versamark ink and stamped it onto my ivory cardstock. And then I am going to take this over and dump on my gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. And I'll tap off the excess, and then I can heat emboss all of these sentiments at once. Now you know that you're done embossing when your embossing powder is nice and smooth, it doesn't look grainy at all, and it has turned from kind of a dark color to a shiny gold. And then you can let that cool for just a second. Grab the Nice of You die from the Nice of You stamp set, and you can line this up with all of these strip sentiments that you have just stamped in one fell swoop. It is so cool. And I love stamps like this because you get so much out of one stamp and one die cut. I mean, it is like a lot of sentiments all at once and very little time. So I'm going to line up my die here. I'm going to hold it in place with some removable tape, and then I'm going to run this through my die cut machine. And you're going to see I am left with all these perfectly die cut sentiment strips that will coordinate beautifully with the U word that is included in the All About You stamp set as well. Now there's also a coordinating U die, and I will be using that today. So I have die cut the letters from some gold cardstock here, some metallic gold cardstock, and I've cut the outline from some vellum. And I'm just using a little bit of liquid adhesive to adhere the letters to that shadow piece. And then I combined it with the words "Are Kind" from that All About You stamp set. And I'm going to adhere this onto my card front to complete my card. Now this makes an absolutely beautiful card as it is, but I decided I wanted a little more sparkle, so I added some sparkling clear sequins and that sun that I die cut from some corally orange cardstock, and that is a part of the Abstract Sunset die set as well. Now my second idea for using these Abstract Mountain and Abstract Sunset dies is to stamp or use a die to add some texture to these backgrounds. So I have this lined by hand background stamp. I have mounted it to the door of my MISTI, and I'm turning over this Abstract Mountain background that I built just the same way that I did my first background onto the stamp. And I am going to add just a little adhesive onto the back of that background and then close my MISTI upside down so that Abstract Mountain background is stuck inside of my MISTI. I'm going to ink up this stamp with a little bit of Versamark ink and then stamp it onto my background. Now I did have to stamp this 3 or 4 times, but because I'm using a MISTI stamping tool, that was easy to do. I just opened it up, re-inked, and stamped again. And that built up the depth and darkness of this Versamark ink onto my background. Now at this point, you could add some clear embossing powder if you wanted to, but I just wanted to show that a stamp with Versamark watermark ink on this background would add a lot of texture and interest to this already gorgeous background. So you can see I have those lines stamped onto my background and I have just a little bit of texture added. You could achieve this same kind of idea with a background die that's maybe like a piercing background die or something that doesn't actually cut your paper but adds some pierced details, like the brand new stitching plate cover die from the Essentials by Ellen line. So I just finished this card off again with some sparkling clear sequins, the little moon that's included in the Abstract Mountain die set, and the sentiment from the All About You stamp set. Now, my third idea for using these Abstract Mountain and Abstract Sunset dies is to slice it up. So I am going to start by building my background here. I'm using the Abstract Sunset background once again. I'm adding a little bit of Zig two-way glue with the chisel nib to the top of each of these layers because I'm going to add a little bit of foil detail. So I added the glue kind of in dry brush style along the tops of these layers, and I allowed the glue to dry. Then I grabbed some iCraft Deco Foil in Champagne and pressed it onto that dried adhesive, and now I have these really beautiful foil accents on the tops of these die-cut sunset layers. Now I took this over to my guillotine trimmer to trim off the little bit of excess copy paper that's sticking out from behind this background that I created. And then I'm going to take it over to my Fiskars trimmer to trim this down, and I'm going to cut this into kind of like a triptych here. So I'm cutting at about 1¼ inches, and I'm going to keep that piece. Then I'm going to scooch this piece over to about the 1/8 inch mark and trim off a little piece, a little sliver. Now I'm going to move this again to the 1¼ inch mark, and I'm going to trim again. Now, once I trim at that 1¼ inch mark, you can see I'm always moving my blade from bottom up. I just find that when I'm working with a piece that's been adhered together like this, I like to move my blade from the bottom towards the top. I get a little more speed moving up towards the paper and kind of get a cleaner cut. Then I'm going to move this over 1/8 inch again and trim off that little bit of sliver again. So I'm going to be left with a piece that has these two 1/8 inch strips missing, and I am going to adhere this all back together on top of a navy piece of cardstock to create this triptych effect. Now on this layer here where you can see the white cardstock, I did add dimension to that, and I just used, once again, some plain white cardstock layers and a little bit of liquid adhesive to build up some dimension on that layer. Now, if you wanted to, you could definitely use some foam adhesive to adhere the layer on top of the other piece, but using that white cardstock really makes for a solid base for this very thin little layer in this Abstract Sunset background. So I'm going to do this the same way that I did the arch in the beginning. I'm just adding my layers here of cardstock and trimming them down. And then once I move on to the next piece in this triptych, I'm going to take the little scraps that I cut off from the first piece. I'm going to line them up on that second piece of the triptych and trim them down and move across the triptych in that way. And a triptych, by the way, is just a 3-panel piece of art. So you can see I've adhered this all together on a piece of navy cardstock, and I've added my sentiment there, and that completes my third card. Now, my fourth and final idea for using these Abstract Mountain and Abstract Sunset dies is to create a window card, and I'm going to create a trifold window card today. So I have 2 pieces of the Essentials by Ellen linen cardstock cut to 5.5 by 8.5 inches, and I'm scoring them at 4.25. So this would be a standard A2 size card. Now, once I have them scored, I'm going to just reinforce the fold line with my Teflon bone folder. And I will adhere these 2 card bases together to create my trifold card. But I want to add some windows to both of these panels here so that you can see my Abstract Mountain background through the windows on this card front. So I'm going to take this card that will go on the left side of my trifold, and I'm going to trim just a little tiny sliver off using my guillotine trimmer. So you can see the little tiny amount. This is just going to help it to nestle into the fold and everything to fold up well without anything impeding it. So I am taking one of the Essentials by Ellen Essential Rectangle dies, and I'm cutting a rectangle window in this card front. So you can see I will have my window there. Now I'm going to take my second card base, and I am going to cover the front of it using some of the Stardust cardstock from Concord and Ninth. That's because I want my second window to have this kind of Stardust color around it. So if you wanted to have 2 white window frames, you definitely could, but I wanted to bring in a little of this Stardust color. So I'm taking a panel of that cardstock and adhering it onto what will be the front of this card, even though it's backwards. So you can see this is how this will all go together. I have my die cut still taped in place on that first card front. I'm just making sure as I go along that everything's gonna work. And then I've taken a second smaller rectangle die and I'm gonna nestle that into the first die cut window that I created. And I'm gonna die cut it from that second card base. Now, when I'm die cutting these, I'm making sure that the card base is opened up so that I don't go through all of the layers here. And I'm gonna run that through my die cut machine. Now I have both of my windows created and I will be able to see my Abstract Mountain backdrop that I've created from the Abstract Mountain die through both of these windows. So I'm just covering the back of that background that I've created with a little bit of tape runner adhesive, and I'm going to adhere it inside of the first card base. So this is the one with the larger window. I'm just adhering it on the inside. And then I am going to take my second card base. This is the one that has the stardust colored frame on it. And I'm going to adhere these two card bases together. So I'm flipping this over, and on the back of the first card base, I'm covering that with adhesive. And then I will nestle these two card bases together to create my tri-fold window card. So I'm just kind of using the fold lines and kind of nestling them together, make sure I get them all lined up. And that completes my tri-fold window card here. Super easy to put together. And I'm gonna finish this off with a sentiment right in the middle of those two windows and a little bit of twine to kind of hold this shut. Now I have used rectangle dies for my windows on this tri-fold card today, but you could also use circles or those arches that I showed you earlier. You could use hearts or ovals. The sky is really the limit. And if you don't want to do a double window card, this is really easy to take off that second card base and make a single window card as well. Now I finished off the little scene, like I mentioned before, with my sentiment and a little sun that I die cut from that Stardust cardstock as well. And I added a little bit of natural twine along the bottom to hold this tri-fold card shut. And I think that is a really fun addition to this card. So there you have it, 4 ways to use the brand new Essentials by Ellen Abstract Mountain and Abstract Sunset dies. These were so much fun to work with. I had such a blast. I ended up creating the whole day, and I have some other cards that I'm sharing on my personal blog as well, featuring these great new dies from the Essentials by Ellen line. As always, I will have links to the featured products used in these projects in the description at YouTube. So if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. Or you can head on over to the coordinating ellenhudson.com blog post. I will have that linked below as well. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. As always, thanks so much for stopping by. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on the ellenhudson.com YouTube channel so you won't miss any of our paper crafting and card making video tutorials. And if you love these projects, we would appreciate it if you would share this video with a friend as well. And while you're at it, don't forget to let me know which of these 4 cards is your favorite in the comments below. Thanks again for hanging out with me today. I am so glad you're here. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end. You know, if you've made it this far, you are one of my favorites. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, go ahead and click the button on the left side of the screen. And here's a couple more video tutorials I thought you might enjoy.